Welcome to this series exploring innovation, progress and achievement using a technocentric paradigm by Ash Stewart.
You may want to also read Ash's original Substack article for the best experience, including footnotes and other details.
Episode 38. Cities in the Skies. Stepping up, rising high. On a parallel path of powerful innovation amid punishing constraints. It's been at least 40 episodes now, counting Part B follow-ups, in our series where I explore, as often mentioned, innovation, progress, and achievement in this paradigm where I look upon both material and institutional innovations as technology, hence the technocentric, inspired by the original sense of the ancient Greek tekhne, meaning skill, art. This time, I'm going to do something a bit different from these previous episodes. Let's go. Over the course of these episodes, spanning the earliest examples of human innovation right up to the cusp of the modern era, the late Middle Ages if you prefer, we have explored a wide range of artefactual and institutional developments, starting with the simple handaxe and taming fire to plant and animal domestication, notably the horse, to the wheel, bronze, their impressive integration by the Proto-Indo-Europeans, writing, the development of institutions such as the state and the market on its basis, urbanization, and in the first stage, its almost complete and utter collapse, and then renewal, iron, a great many intellectual developments including mathematics, the zero, law, language, universities, and paper. Now let's play Jenga Tower and start unpicking some of these and still see what stands. Let's start with the wheel, which, as I've said, is something so fundamental to us, we can't imagine life without it. Let's pull out the horse, that great trusty enabler of speed, strength, and glory. Heck, let's remove metal tools. Why, let's erase iron and steel out of the picture, and for the most part, even writing. How's the Jenga Tower holding up? Imagine this counterfactual universe where we grew up without these. How would life be in such a parallel universe? In fact, such a parallel universe has indeed been in existence, the Americas. Otherworldly matters. Yes, the Americas, before European contact. Perhaps more precisely, Eurasian contact. Because in our journey of exploration, we've seen that innovation occurred in different trajectories and to different heights in different ways across different parts of the Eurasian landmass, with the result that Europe proper itself was often late to the party, sometimes by at least 500 years, episode 28, by more than 1,000 years, episode 37, or even, in some small instances, up to 4,000 years, episode 19. I trust I've succeeded in demonstrating these dynamics such that it's clear that the accumulated mass of innovation the old people of the so-called New World encountered at first contact was in fact Eurasian. Within the Eurasian context, broadly, the story starts off about 10,000 years ago with the advent of agriculture, the first and decisive change. The next big milestone, as I've said, would be around the time of the aforementioned Proto-Indo-Europeans and the rise of other Bronze Age civilizations about 5,000 years ago, with our current cutoff point for until episode 40 being about 500 years ago. Let's see how things panned out over this period across the Atlantic. Given that I'm trying to condense such a large period of time and the attendant developments into one single article here, I have a few necessary disclaimers to make. Firstly, this piece prioritizes breadth over depth. That much should be obvious. I don't intend to offer you a 50-page thesis, and even if I wanted to, I couldn't, given the sheer intellectual challenge of synthesizing the vast amount of research needed within a once-a-week publishing schedule as mine is. Thus, there will necessarily be simplifications, even what may be seen as inaccurate in the lack of additional qualifications and explanation. Furthermore, given that some of the research in this field is quite recent, even 2025, combined with other research being based on scant material or traditionally distorted approaches, I must confess I cannot confirm, even to myself, the academic and intellectual rigor I aim for. But my objective in this piece is to give us a glimpse of a parallel universe, for there are many lessons we could possibly learn, and this will thus also be more of a listing than traditional narrative as usual. So without further ado, let's go to pre-Columbian Americas. First, motions. Mammoth changes. Our journey, even in the Americas, starts roughly at the same time, 10,000 years ago. This is essentially the Holocene transition of circa 11,700 BP before present, where there was global warming enabling the growth of crops. You might remember from previous episodes, such as episode 21 and episode 36, how global warming has been beneficial to human civilization time and again. However, and in particular in the Americas, in the period around 13,800 to 11,500 BP, the end of the late Pleistocene, there's reported to have been a mass extinction event, the megafaunal extinctions, where a large number of genera died out. This has been explained as partly a result of the climatic changes, and partly, in North America in particular, a result of overhunting, the overkill hypothesis, by the people we call Native Americans, or First Nations. Then recent arrivals from East Asia through the hitherto existent land bridge, Beringia. Folk so skilled at hunting that they created a task failed successfully moment? There's much debate on this rather complex development, but suffice it to say that we may consider that the people in the Americas got off on a less advantageous start into the New Age compared to those in Eurasia, in particular with a smaller number of domesticable animals. Compare horses, cattle, pigs, sheep, goats, camels, etc. in Eurasia to the lone llama or a lone alpaca. A fertile cornucopia. Despite these comparative setbacks, there have been some impressive technological achievements within agriculture, one of the most shining examples of innovation in the Americas. Let's take a closer look. Perhaps the most amazing example of this is maize or corn. Starting 9,000 years ago, the transformation of teosinte, a grass with 5 to 12 hard-cased seeds on shattering ears, into what we know as naked kernels of maize on intact cobs, is perhaps the greatest example of a genetically modified crop. Crucially, this crop is highly efficient, producing 2.5 times more calories per land area than Old World wheat or barley. Who in the modern world can imagine life without the potato? Farmers in the Andes, where its domestication began, developed over 4,000 varieties adapted to extreme microclimates at up to 14,000 feet or 4,250 meters in elevation. Linked to this is their freeze-drying technology called chuño, whereby it could be stored for decades. This freeze-drying technique was known to Europe only in 1906. The Chinampa system of floating gardens developed in the basin of Mexico and particularly supporting Tenochtitlan are artificial islands engineering for hyper-intensive agriculture, which yielded up to 7 harvests per year, producing 13 times more produce than conventional farming. At its height, it supported populations exceeding 200,000 in Tenochtitlan alone. The list goes on. There's the Three Sisters polyculture, combining maize, beans, and squash, in a self-sustained ecological system, producing 6 times more maize than in a monoculture, and up to 53% more total food per land unit. There is the marvel of the Andean terracing, extending growing zones, enabling high-altitude maize cultivation, reducing soil erosion by up to 60%, and sustaining the Inca Empire's population of about 10 million. Then there is the terra preta phenomenon of tropical soil management across vast tract of the Amazonian basin, debunking the popular notion of the Amazon was pristine wilderness before European arrival. I'm leaving more details in the footnotes for each such development, and given that the overall list is rather long, I'm going to simply leave a very terse summary of the rest of the notable achievements in the main article for the other areas. Again, you have the footnotes to nerd out on. The indigenous. Urban/architecture.
Teotihuacan. This planned metropolis housed 125,000 to 200,000 people across 12 square miles with precise grid layout and 2,000-plus apartment compounds. It rivaled Rome in scale while being built entirely without wheeled transport, using strategic material selection and organized human labor.
Think assembling IKEA furniture without the Allen key.
Inca precision stonework. Inca masons achieved ashlar masonry so precise that knife blades cannot penetrate the joints between multi-ton polygonal blocks fitted without mortar. This earthquake-resistant construction technique survived centuries of seismic activity that destroyed Spanish colonial buildings, demonstrating structural engineering through design rather than material strength.
Information systems.
Mayan writing. The Mayans developed a fully independent logosyllabic writing system starting around 300 BC, combining logograms and syllabograms with approximately 75% now deciphered. This represents one of only 4 or so independent writing inventions in human history, achieving phonetic completeness that surpassed Egyptian hieroglyphics. Mayan mathematics and zero. The Mayans independently discovered zero as placeholder by the 300s, nearly simultaneously with ancient India. Using a vigesimal positional system, they calculated the solar year as 365.2422 days, only 0.002 days different from the actual value, enabling astronomical predictions centuries into the future.
Engineering/infrastructure.
Inca road system, Capac Ñan. The Incas built over 25,000 miles, 40,000 kilometers of roads, spanning deserts, mountains, and jungle, from modern-day Colombia to Chile, without wheeled vehicles or draft animals. This network rivaled Rome's road system through sophisticated engineering, including stone paving, drainage systems, and suspension bridges, enabling rapid communication via relay runners covering 150 to 200 miles daily. Suspension bridges. Inca engineers constructed rope suspension bridges from braided grass fibers spanning up to 50 yards, 45 meters, across deep Andean gorges. These bridges could support up to 200,000 pounds, sufficient for Spanish horses and cannons, demonstrating that high-tensile structural engineering was achievable without metal cables through fiber technology and community maintenance systems.
Materials.
Obsidian technology. Obsidian blades achieved edges approximately 3 nanometers thick, 10 to 20 times sharper than modern surgical steel, at 300 to 600 angstroms. This volcanic glass technology, combined with trade networks extending 300-plus kilometers, provided cutting tools superior to early iron implements, reducing the technological imperative for metal tool development. Quipu, not base records. The Incas administered roughly 10 million people across 1.2 million square miles using quipu, knotted string devices employing decimal positional notation with 3 knot types. This 3-dimensional data storage system enabled empire-wide census tracking, tribute coordination, and inventory management, proving complex state administration was achievable without graphic writing.
And all of this without the horse and other draft animals, the wheel and iron or steel, and in many cases even without writing, which only the Mayans can claim full credit of. But let's also remind ourselves when we say without item this or tool that, because I've seen this in some of my sources as well. It seems to suggest implicitly that somehow the people who developed these things were aware of it, that when say things like, despite these constraints, as if they knew that they had such constraints. Of course, it's no such thing. We, from our vantage point, cannot but think about such an alternative scenario from the perspective of how things would have seemed to them. I've often pondered over the epistemological and historiographical challenges, or indeed constraints, we in the modern world face in this regard. Despite that, I trust this sweeping overview has given an idea of this alternate case scenario, this parallel world. This is also important because, until perhaps the advent of advanced superintelligence, we cannot simulate alternate universes with sufficiently detailed modeling and sophistication to match the real world. And in the post-contact modern world, where knowledge can flow from anyone in any area to another, not always, but it's possible, such a centuries or millennia-long alternative evolution cannot be conceived of. So what are the lessons we draw from all this? There were other innovations the people in the Americas came up with which produced similar, or indeed in many cases, better outcomes than we did in the old world over that period, with implements that in hindsight we would consider superior, such as the three main ones I've mentioned. But they got to lift stuff well without draft animals, move stuff well without horses, and build and cut stuff finely without metal. And we have these people to thank for, among others, maize, potatoes, tomatoes, varieties of beans, squash, chili, cocoa, and chocolate, peanuts, avocados, sunflowers, papaya, pineapple, and quinoa. When we in the modern day deem ourselves as technologically or institutionally superior to peoples past, it's because, as I've said before, we've had the advantage of building over previous innovations. But there is no one single path to innovation, and perhaps sadly, no single guaranteed formula to success. Or perhaps that's why innovation is fun, because it's unpredictable. For me, the lesson from all this is one of humility and gratitude. What's it for you?